Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have a Christmas card to share with you, doing some watercoloring. It's a really simple card featuring the Dear Santa stamp set from Hello Bluebird. I got this one last year, just before Christmas, but I didn't got time to create a card with it, so I decided to do that quite quickly after New Year's. I know it's just when you can stop for a few months with Christmas cards that I just immediately started just to really already use a stamp set that I got late in the Christmas card season creation thingy. So yeah, this is going to be my first Christmas card to share with you this year, and I have a few others that I still have to share that I made last minute last year, but didn't do the editing yet. So that will be coming up as well. I'm not going to show them all at once. I will try to separate them a tiny bit and share it over the next few weeks. But just a heads up that that is coming as well. So as I said in the beginning, I'm featuring the Dear Santa stamp set, and I'm going to do some watercoloring using my distress ink. This has been quite a while since I did watercoloring. So what I do is I smoosh the inks on top of an acrylic block or on a media mat if you have it, or anything like that, and then I take that ink, add a bit of water, and go with my paintbrush all over my images until I'm happy with the coloring. So if you want to revisit combinations, you can always find them on my blog post. I have them listed for each of the critters, for the images, but it's really simple watercoloring. Now the paper that I'm using is Strathmore Bristol Smooth, which is a paper that I love to use when watercoloring. Just keep in mind that it can handle water, but it is also not a paper that can handle tons of water. So just let your layers dry in between and then go back in to add more layers, more depth. Another thing that I always hold nearby whenever I'm watercoloring is a, just a paper towel or paper cloth or anything like that, just to help me dab off the excess water on my paintbrush after cleaning, so that I have like kind of a really thick layer of ink that I bring on top of the paper instead of a really watery layer. And then I make my paintbrush damp and I drag that color all over the critters or images that I'm coloring. The ink that I'm using, also really important, the ink should be able to resist water. So the one that I am using is Versafine Onyx black ink. Also, it has been a while since I used that one, and it is really moist, mine. So I used it and then I started painting, and then I saw that I was like smearing the ink underneath where the dog is. So that's why I took this tiny piece of paper to put underneath my hand so that I would not smear anything else. After die cutting you cannot see the smearing, so that's good. Just keep that in mind as well. So here I'm going back over the cat because I needed some more depth. So I'm just bringing that ink to the cat and I'm dragging it out towards the rest of the image. Here as well, I have a thick amount of ink on top of my paintbrush, barely any water. I bring it to the image, then I create a damp paintbrush, which is a paintbrush after cleaning or when you dab it into water, that you first dab off all of the excess water on top of that paper towel that you have, and then you can just really softly move it around just where you need it to be. I tried keeping in mind like shadowing whenever I was coloring the critters, but for the mailbox I decided to add shadows more towards the right side, so I have a centered light source here. My red color is a combination specifically of aged mahogany and candied apple, but for the innards of the ears I used the Victorian velvet. I'm just bringing it in, dragging it out wherever I need to be, just until I'm happy with the depth. So for the mailbox, I decided to use Hickory Smoke. I wanted to use another gray than the mouse. The mouse has pumice stone. Um, just to give it something different. This one is really, really gray, while the mouse still has like a brown hint in it. So I had some work on getting like definition going on the mailbox. It's a really soft gray, and while dragging it out, I was kind of losing um, the color. So I just kept adding until I was happy with it. But each time trying to wait until adding a second layer to just let the paper rest in between so that I would not rip it or anything like that. I'm also keeping in mind that shadowing in the inside of the mailbox is going to be a bit darker than all over. Um, and I'm keeping everything gray. You can also do like a wooden pole where the mailbox is on top of it, or just play a bit with colors here and there. I wanted to have like this really old gray um, metal mailbox and then a hint of red. So I just keep adding. As you can see here, the paintbrush that I'm using is a really cheap one, so any paintbrush in my opinion will do. I just find that with this, it's zero, that I have kind of control over the hairs that are on top of it. These are synthetic hairs. For me it helps keeping them kind of straight and nice to paint with, but it's all up to you what you like using. um, just use that one. It's not kind of, this is not out of the box what I'm doing here. I'm just filling in all the areas. Also for the snow I wanted a tiny bit of color, but not too much because I wasn't going to ink blend anything on the background. So this speckled egg was just perfect for the snow. And then I just have to do a few hints of shadows on the leather, then the red elements, and then I'm done with all the coloring. So now I'm just going to add a final layer on top of the mailbox. I kind of find that now you can see the gray and the shadowing, but in the beginning it was really, really hard to get it on there. Now, as I said previously, the red elements are going to be aged mahogany and candied apple. My candied apple ink cube has been really, really moist from the start. It still is, so I just started with like a base of that. Then I dragged it out as I did with the other colors, and then I'm going to use that aged mahogany to just deepen it a bit more, because now it's really, really bright, and I found with all of the critters and how I colored them that I needed a deeper red than what I currently am getting with the candied apple. So here I'm just bringing it in. Again, I am adding the shadows or the ink where I want my shadows to be, and then I'm dragging it out and softening it towards the rest of the images. Towards the, well, not the rest of the images, but the other areas of the images. So you also can just use one ink cube for the colors as I did on the critters, but in case it's just not working out, you can always combine several inks together to get that perfect color that you need. So I'm almost done here. Just a bit more of the darker color, and then once everything is dry I can easily use the dies to cut these two images out, and then we can start on the rest of the card. I must admit that I colored these images and then I had no clue what to do with them, so they have been sitting like a few days before I continued with the card because I just couldn't figure out the background or the card that I wanted to create. There is always an option to keep it really simple, and it ended up with a really simple card, but I don't think that I ever did a design like this. So I'm really happy with the end result, and I hope that it can inspire you as well. Now, before continuing, I'm first going to add some white jelly roll pen details, which is also something that I'm trying to do more this year, but not really used to it, so I'm not going to do it every time, but I'm trying to get more used to them, to adding the white highlights. Logic-wise, I do not have any logic in adding it. I just try to add enough and not too much. And I realize that most of the time I add them on the darker areas because it stands out more to have it there. Maybe it's not logical to add it there because the shadowing and highlights, well, normally they don't go together, I think. But it really stands out so much more adding it to a dark brown area than to like light or soft brown area. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Just letting them stand out. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to continue with the card design, the overall design, which has tons to do with pink colors, because soft pink is always beautiful and it goes actually well with the red. Normally I would be a bit terrified of adding red next to pink, but a really soft pink, it works. So the pink color that I'm using here is the Ballet slipper from Concord and 9th. I'm going to use cardstock, but also the ink itself. I use the nesting Deckle mini slimline die to cut out like this mini slimline panel out of the pink, and I'm going to use it, a big part of this panel I'm going to use a bit offset on my background. So as you can see here, I'm going to create an A2 size card with this mini slimline element on top. It's not the largest one, maybe it's the second or third largest of the nesting Deckle mini slimline die, but I forgot. And I also cut it out of white, as you can see here, and I'm just going to create my own snowy hill where my images can later on be added on top. Next, I'm going to build a tiny scene that I have created, and for the sentiment I will do some white heat embossing. So once I was kind of sure how to add the critters and this mailbox, I used some liquid glue for the mailbox and then some thin foam squares for the critters. And since I'm going to offset this panel on top of my card base, I could let some things overhang because there is still an area on the left and right side of this panel when I'm adhering it to my card base. So I'm adding as much thin foam squares as I can on the back of these critters. Then I'm going to remove the backings and add it to my panel. Now, first I wanted to add it on a white card base, but then testing it out, I just wasn't sure about it. So I'm going to fix that later on as well. But let's first just white heat emboss the sentiment. I'm prepping my card stock as always, because this way hopefully there will be less embossing powder sticking all over the panel and just on the sentiment. And I'm using the white embossing powder from Ranger. This one is super fine detail, so it's really handy for tiny or thin scripts like these. And then I'm going to heat set the sentiment. And then, as I said, there was kind of an issue for me with adding it right on white. So I decided to take that white panel that I wanted to adhere on top of my card base and first stamp like a background stamp on top of it. So I am going to stamp the woven background from Hello Bluebird on top. I also have the Ballet slipper ink cube here. It's a tiny one, I only have the tiny ink cubes, but it's a really gorgeous color, and I press it down really well on top of the paper. Now I'm going to do it the second time, And it's not always handy to have this tiny ink cube, because this way I have to cover kind of a lot before I can stamp it out, and it's not always covering everything. But I was alright with what I had after 2 times stamping it out. So it's really soft, but the recipient will clearly see that there is kind of background paper going on. So I just am snipping off the excess here of that background that we just created, and then I will add the panel. For a big part, I will add the Slimline panel on top, the mini Slimline panel. I just needed some sort of a trace to know where to snip off the excess, or to which point I could add foam tape, and then it's easier later on to cut off the excess. So I'm using some foam tape. I'm going to cover the back completely, or as much as possible. And then I will bring it to my panel. And then this card is actually almost finished. So really simple. Also the design, I don't know if you can currently see like the background that I stamped with the woven background stamp from Hello Bluebird. It's really subtle. You can also do some ink blending if you want to in the back, if you want it to stand out more, be less white, but the original idea was with white, so I kept it as white as possible without being too white, if you know what I mean. So I'm just trying to line it up as straight as possible. Then I'm pressing it down really well, and then I can snip off that excess. Now if you want to, you can definitely leave it as is, but I decided to add some final elements to it. So I took my favorite embellishments, the heart sprinkle mix from Trinity stamps, and I added some white hearts around the sentiment. And since I already added white jelly roll pen details to the critters, I decided to not add anything else except for those hearts, just 3. It took me a while to figure out where I wanted to place them, but I ended up using 3 around the sentiment. So with some liquid glue, I'm going to adhere them, and then this card is completely finished. So I hope that this card can inspire you. I know it's Christmas already here. For some of you it's really early, so if it's too early, then all of the next cards that I will be sharing, Christmas vibes, just keep them for later on, whenever you're ready for Christmas inspiration. In case you're like me and you always like Christmas cards, and I hope that you will join me to get your Christmas cards going, just one at a time, and we'll see where we get before it's Christmas again. Thank you so much for being here and taking your time to watch this video. I hope that I could inspire you. I wish you an incredible day, and I'll be back soon with some new crafty inspiration. Bye!